Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, November 8th, 2023. Time for another show, but not just any other show. Time for our post-election show, and, it's been okay of late. We've had our ups and downs over the years doing our post-election shows in the course of the run of our show here. But this one's okay, and lately they have been, for whatever reason, Republicans are insistent on battling it out directly over the cause of abortion post-Dobbs, and it's not going well for them. So last night, the seventh state to hold a statewide referendum on whether or not they would enshrine the right to an abortion in their own state law and state constitutions. The seventh state to hold such a referendum has also passed that referendum, all of them, 7 for 7. You may recall, of course, that it was Republican doctrine for a long time to leave it to the states. Oh, no, not that way. That's not what we meant. Not those states. Oh, actually, our states? Oh, holy moly. Yeah. It's been electoral poison for Republicans, as has for a little while longer the marijuana initiatives, or as I guess now newspapers are going with the term weed, because, hey, the kids want to read the newspapers. But at any rate, yeah, that one has been known for a little while longer. The abortion one was a bit of a question mark for a while, but then it became obvious that this was something on which they could lose and lose big. So Ohio has ratified that under their question 1. And now a constitutional amendment will be enshrined, and I think they have like 30 days to get it done. And we'll see what kind of shenanigans they can pull in between then and now. You will recall from our discussion of it on the show some months back that Republicans did everything that they could to rig this election such that the 55, almost 56%, that at least the numbers that I've seen lately. I didn't check the numbers at the numbers sites again this morning, but I think one of the infographics I saw circulating this morning had some 55 point something percent. That may be old. I don't know. I'm sure Greg has the latest numbers, or anyway, if any of you have anything that needs correcting, let me know. But remember that they did everything they could to make a 55% yes vote mean no in Ohio. And remember also that the people who were doing this very often have difficulty understanding when no means no. Now I've gone even further. I guess that explains something else that comes up later about how they could possibly think yes means no. I don't know. Although if in the other context they often thought yes meant no, things would be better. But anyway, and there'd probably be fewer abortions as well. Just to throw that in as a bonus for them. Anyway, yeah, so you'll recall that, what was it, like back in August, they had a special election going on in Ohio, and they threw this special measure onto the ballot, Republicans did, declaring that, okay, well, from now on, a statewide referendum to adopt a constitutional amendment must get 60% of the vote, like a filibuster. It must get 60% of the vote in order to pass. And Democrats and abortion rights advocates and people who just don't like the rules changed in the middle of the game, I guess, or the way that they were doing it, got together and defeated that initiative such that it was still the case that a majority of the voters could actually win something somewhere in this country, God forbid. But you'll also recall that it was, prior to August, considered against the law. A Republican passed law from the Republican legislature there in Ohio. It was against the law to put a referendum like that on a special election ballot because, of course, special elections are generally just too low turnout. I mean, maybe that was the reasoning that they adopted at the time. I don't know whether that was their reasoning, but that was fairly sound reasoning, really. that these special elections tend to be low turnout. You don't really want to decide something as important as, well, whatever you might be deciding by statewide initiative, statewide referendum, in a election where so many people are, apt to skip voting. It's just not a good idea. So, of course, that was on the books, and that meant that Republicans couldn't take advantage, they thought, of an opportunity to try to sneak by this new rule that would require a 60% threshold for adopting a constitutional amendment. So they went back to the Republican-controlled legislature and basically adopted a new measure that said, well, just this one time, it'll be okay still, even with this new law that we passed and that we haven't even had a chance to enforce yet. We'll unenforce it for this election because we need the ability to try to sneak something past in a low turnout election. Not only did they give themselves a pass from the law, they gave themselves a pass on something that they knew was likely to become a problem, the very problem that they had identified in passing the previous law. But they did it anyway, and the people of Ohio said, actually, we read a newspaper, and it turns out, F you, we're not allowing it, and they defeated it. And so today, here we are with a 55% victory, which is confusing the Republicans and continues to confuse them because I'll read you the stories later if they're not in Greg's Roundup, but there's a pretty good chance that they're in Greg's Roundup. Ohio Republicans are already saying, maybe we don't actually want to do things the way the voters did. There were two big statewide propositions. One will be easier to reverse than the other, but they're already promising we're going to be back on this abortion issue. We're going to reverse it. We're going to find ways to slow it down, stop it, undo it bit by bit. It's going to be, I think one guy says, a revolving door of abortion initiatives statewide in Ohio, to which I have to guess elections analysts who have seen Republicans get clobbered every time one of these things is on the ballot, I assume they say, you're making me sweat, but I guess good. Try it. Go ahead. We're 7 for 7. Not that I want to tempt fate or anything, but it just gives you an idea of who you're dealing with, I suppose.
I don't want to date myself, but it's make my day.
Yes.
Well, so, go ahead. Make my day.
Make your day. Make you. Yeah, all right.
That's a Dirty Harry reference.
Yeah, right. True. But I think that still carries over. So, hey, it's Greg Dworkin, everybody. When did he get here? Well, 10 minutes ago.
I've been here the entire time. I've been here since Tuesday.
Thank you for standing by. I know you can't wait. What am I doing? Making you wait to talk about election results. That's crazy.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to talk about. But let's just start with this. Stephanie Ruhle observed last night on Twitter. And by the way, Twitter's still the go-to place, like it or not, to follow elections. I tried the others, and it's not the same.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it.
It will be,
what
but
I'm saying.
not yet.
Okay.
So Stephanie Ruhle says in response to Robert Denault says, despite all the media polling showing Trump winning, Republicans beating Democrats being a mess, et cetera, Republicans have yet another bad night. They've fallen short of having a single good election during a Democratic presidency, which is remarkably bad. And Stephanie Ruhle points out, polls suggest and elections prove, and it's not the same.
Yeah. Oh boy, there was all sorts of late evening controversy. I guess the Times Siena poll. You told us about it, and they were so enamored of theirs, or maybe they paid extra and they felt like they needed to get their money's worth. But all the Times columnists were being taken to task online for just writing about, hey, that president guy, the commander in chief, who has all sorts of issues on his plate at any given time. He had an event. He didn't even mention our poll. What's wrong with that guy? From now on, he's a political loser. We're very upset. I don't know why they did this.
It's interesting because one of our Chicago friends on Twitter pointed out, the media really hates Biden because he just doesn't give them the same kind of access.
Is that what it is? I guess. I mean,
he doesn't
Trump
talk to them.
was weird about access.
Them. He doesn't perform for them.
Yeah,
people want and when I say people, I mean reporters. Especially cable. They want a performative president. That's why they're enamored of Trump. He gives you footage you can put on. And Biden doesn't do that. He doesn't give them the same access. He doesn't talk to them as much. And they don't get clicks, and they really don't like it.
I mean, if I gave them clicks, would they leave
elections
alone?
and regular people are a completely different thing.
Yeah. I mean, I would click on their things if they would be reasonable, I guess. Is there a way
but
we
they
can
haven't
set
been
that deal
reasonable.
up? Yeah.
So,
I'll start. I
If
don't
the
mind.
idea here is that you really can't talk about things, what you should do, you want to put Trump put on his freaking trial. Because seeing
Well, they
him,
can't, but yeah.
well, you can do sketches, you can do discussion,
True.
and then he gets out of the courtroom, and up until recently, he's actually said stuff. So there's stuff you can do. When you get to Georgia, you will do. And Liam Donovan, Republican analyst, says, the thing about seeing Trump is he reminds you of all that nostalgia about how great things were during the Trump administration. They evaporate when you actually see him.
Okay.
So that's the advantage of you may not want to see him a lot, but the advantage of seeing him a lot is you get reminded why you don't like him.
Yeah. That's true. Any photo, and really these sketches too, are capturing that pretty well. Hey, he's physically repulsive. Wow.
Right.
I
Listen,
remember
you
I
may
hate
not
him so
like
much.
being triggered by Trump, but if you're a Democratic strategist, you like it that you're triggered by Trump.
Yeah, I guess so. Between that and the losses on their abortion questions, etc.
Yeah, that's the ticket to winning. So
Yay.
I observed,
Yes.
and by the way, doing analysis is a lot easier after you win because it's like the same analysis, but you feel better about it.
Right, I know. This is a lot easier. We've had
Why?
some down nights.
But MAGA doesn't care about Trump trials. It doesn't make any difference to MAGA. January 6th doesn't make any difference. Fill in the blank doesn't make any, and the reason that's failed analysis, MAGA was all in on Daniel Cameron in Kentucky. He lost.
They were on a lot of things. Yeah, he did. He lost big.
Narrator says, it appears that MAGA voters are not, in fact, the only voters.
Yeah, they might actually be a significant minority.
They might indeed. They might be
What?
35%.
Yeah.
That loses.
It sucks that they're 35%, but it sucks less than if they were 50%.
Right. So Tom Bonnier had a couple of victory laps, having said, don't worry about the New York Times poll, just look at the election. Then we saw the election. And Bonnier said, look, responding to a poll when you're out is not the same thing as casting an actual ballot, along the lines of what Stephanie Rule was saying. And what we were saying, of course. A poll response is a chance to air your grievances. A vote is a choice between finite options. In case we need more evidence of this, in the CNN poll, 9% of liberals said they would vote for Trump. That's not happening. And for those trying to reconcile these polls with the reality of last night's election results by saying, well, it's a Biden problem, not a Democratic problem, the CNN poll has Trump at 49 and the generic House Republicans at 48. It's not what we saw last night. The polls are not a useful tool for predicting vote choice right now. And in fact, he added, the GOP faced a lot of bitter disappointments last night, but at least they'll always have that New York Times Siena poll.
Yeah, right. You can cling to that. And the Times columnists will help you.
Right.
We paid for
earlier
this,
in the evening, he had said something I think which is even more significant. My biggest takeaway from tonight in the 2022 abortion rights, in 2022, abortion rights had the biggest impact where it was literally on the ballot, like in Ohio.
Yeah.
Kansas.
Well, 22. Yeah, Kansas. Right.
But like in Ohio in 23.
Right.
Kansas in 22, places like that.
Yes.
Less so
Yes.
when trying to draw the connection in candidate races. But that's changed. Voters clearly made the connection that voting for GOP candidates equals abortion bans. And I would add, and no better scene than in Virginia.
Right. No
where,
doubt. Oh my
Glenn
God, did
Youngkin,
I see it?
as Norm Ornstein said, was fleeced. He
Yeah.
tried to hide behind, I'm just taking a moderate position, 15 weeks, and then we'll give exceptions. And everybody in Virginia said, you're lying.
Yeah.
We know, looking around the country, if you have the opportunity, you'll take it away. We
Yes.
gave you that leeway with Brett Kavanaugh, and look what happened. We're not falling for that again.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in Virginia.
Every mailer. Believe me, every mailer 10 times a day for months made the point as clear as possible. And they heard it and said, yeah, Virginia was exciting and fun, and sitting in the middle of it was just made it that much, more nerve-wracking. But it was a very good night there, and candidates up and down the ballot. And I don't mind saying, once again, Loudoun County showed everybody who they were again.
Ooh, I got that on my list.
So we'll go there. I'll let you take
Newtown
us
as
there.
well. Newtown, Connecticut threw out the Republicans and switched them in for Democrats because we had a book banning issue here and we didn't like it.
Hey, as it turns out, like their core issues are
bad.
Super
People
unpopular.
Don't like what they stand for.
Yeah.
I mean, that's basically what's going on here. So Tom Bonnier says, the GOP spent a lot of money in Virginia convincing their voters to return to early voting, and it was effective, and they still lost. They wound up cannibalizing the election date. We always say, I wonder if these new voters are who are they? And Bonnier and a couple of other people had actually analyzed the early vote.
Oh.
I think it was Ben Trevitt, not Larry Sabato, said, we looked at this.
Yeah.
And these are the regular GOP voters who were voting early. And that means they won't vote on election day. That's not what you want. That's not how it works.
No.
If you do early voting, what you want to do is you want to get the low propensity voter.
Yes. I find
who
that
otherwise wouldn't vote, lock him in by getting him in an early vote. Secondary to that is getting your regular voter to vote so that you can use your resources to get the low propensity voter on election day. But that's really hard because they're low propensity. What you really want is you want that vote banked.
Yeah.
They don't understand that. They did it wrong. They're going to lose, is what he said the day before the election.
Okay.
And he was right.
Yeah.
He's often right.
I'm glad about that.
That's
a tough thing to get the low
they were
propensity.
effective at getting the early vote out. They still lost. There's no more excuses. Their extremism is a fatal flaw at this point.
Yeah.
It's what they stand for, not how they run the election. That's why they lose. We see that in Ohio, where they have the gavel, they make the rules, they still lose.
Yeah. Yeah, they do. And it's I'm tremendously glad for it. The Republicans in Virginia did get tarred with this, and it's their own fault. Because this is, it's not being tarred, I guess, really, if it's just, well, this is what you're about. I mean, I guess you can be tarred if you tar
not
yourself.
just Virginia, but certainly in Virginia. Also in Kentucky, where Andy Bashir had ads running basically about a 12-year-old who was raped by her stepfather. And Daniel Cameron is saying that he wants me to carry it the term, no exceptions. What's wrong with this? This is terrible. How do you do this to a 12-year-old? Those were the ads. They were incredibly powerful. It's part of the reason why Bashir won. Another part, of course, is that he was very good with emergency management for floods and tornadoes in the coal mine areas and the coal fields.
Okay.
And so he did okay in these so-called ancestral Democratic areas that have since gone Republican in Appalachia. But nonetheless, he didn't run away from the abortion issue. And like in Ohio, it helped him.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I guess this was counterintuitive to people who have been afraid of the issue for so long.
Right. So
but I mean,
rather
you're
than
getting
being
lots of
afraid
data
of the
here,
issues,
guys.
let me put it this way: you look at these polls about Joe Biden and wonder how he could win. Imagine the ads that haven't run yet that are going to, guaranteed. Every frickin' Democratic ad is going to say, "I'm Donald Trump. I killed Roe v. Wade." That's a quote. They'll play it.
Oh.
They have video.
Okay.
He said it at a rally.
All right. He says a lot
I
of
killed
things.
Roe v. Wade. Yes, you did.
All right.
And vote
For life.
Democrat.
Yeah, I guess so. Good.
So until you see those, campaigns have salience. Campaigns make a difference. Campaigns activate people. We said this on the show last week. And so Wisconsin's an example of that. Well, now Ohio, Kentucky, and certainly Virginia are examples of that.
Yeah. Well, now we see whether the Virginia state legislature acts in some way to enshrine rights here, but it's certainly been
they'll block
powerful.
it from being taken away. That's for sure.
Yes. So there'll be some gamesmanship back and forth about who can do what. But
I don't know what they'll do because
I don't know either.
Youngkin won't sign it.
Right. No, but he's still playing this weird game. I don't know who's telling him, oh, yeah, you got higher office in you, for sure.
Well, that's okay. But here's Politico, and Politico, believe me, is no friend to Democrats. And here's their headline: Democrats romp, Youngkin flops.
Yeah. Well, good.
That's what happened.
Right. So I'm glad they got that right. But it may be in the interest of Virginia Democrats to keep handing them things to veto That's fine. We stake out our position. This will be on the ballot again. You stake out your position. You think you're going somewhere. I mean, I think everybody is kind of coming to the conclusion that presidential race may be just not in the cards for this guy or anybody, really.
Right.
Because they're
Here's
sticking with
the New
Trump.
York Times headline. Virginia dashes Youngkin's hopes of a GOP takeover and maybe more.
Yeah. And so I guess he starts shifting his focus to, well, maybe I can win one of these Senate seats. I'm like, not if you continue to be you and back the positions
and again,
that you
people outside
like.
of Virginia may not realize this. You certainly do. You were unfortunately living through all these stupid ads. But Youngkin didn't just sit back and say, okay, well, like Ron DeSantis, let my legislature do all the hard lifting and I'll just endorse it. I'll tell them what to do. Youngkin took a very active role in this 15-week abortion ban. He said, it's my thing. He injected himself into a lot of these races. He made sure everybody understood this was his idea. And so when the House flipped from Republican to Democratic control based on last night's election and the Senate, House of Delegates, and the Senate stayed in Democratic control, that was a direct hit on Glenn Youngkin.
Yes. Now he was, still getting advice from people who are like, you're going to pull this out. B, we're the ones that'll buck the trend here on abortion. And this will make you presidential material, et cetera, et cetera. And, the rest of us, I guess it's easier if you're a Youngkin opponent, let's say, or you voted against him, the first and only time he ran for governor. And knowing that he's had the Senate in the way, he hasn't accomplished much, but really it's been near zero. And he really thought this was going to be the thing that was going to set him up, and that statewide Republicans would see him as their savior, and he's got to be on the top of our ticket forever in Virginia because he's the guy pulling it out for all of us. And this was the thing he was going to use to prove that he was the guy who had found the magic formula, that the vest will protect you from extremism charges. And right up through yesterday, all of the major national media continued to do that and say, well, he's found the formula. He's the non-MAGA Republican candidate. And although that's not working out for them in their presidential nominating contest to date, in the future or whatever, but as I think Dave Weigel is reminding everybody on social media, I don't know, this is his superpower, that he gets people to think of him as somehow other than MAGA, but you can't send the Virginia National Guard down to the Texas border on a wild goose chase for fentanyl and then also come up empty, because that's not what's happening on the border, and come back and say, yeah, I'm non-MAGA. That's not a non-MAGA thing to do.
Well, you can't say that I'm for a moderate 15-week ban, except everybody knows that my supporters have said they want a complete ban. Now, they're going to lie about it because I'll get them to, toe the line in regard to messaging. I'm very good about that. But there's all these clips of them saying, I want to go further, and it's going to be played. And so we are going to know that I am trying to play you. And so I just want you to be aware of that. All right. I just think the fascinating part, again, we'll get to Pennsylvania too, but this is my Loudoun County piece. This is from Huffington Post. Liberals win a majority in battleground Virginia school board race.
Yes, they did.
Loudoun County has become a poster child for the battle over culture war issues in public schools, including trans students' rights and discussions on race. Trans student rights were an issue in Kentucky as well. It's not a winning issue. Abortion for Republicans is not a winning issue. January 6th is not a winning issue. And the issues that Republicans run on and want to run on are losers. Mm-hmm. So they can figure out how to repackage it any way they want, like in Ohio or Virginia. It ain't working for them.
Yeah. Well, again, in defense of Loudoun County, the numbers were always the same. Loudoun County is what it is, but people had this
majority now on a 9-seat board.
Yeah, had this tremendous disadvantage. That was they were leveraging the name of Loudoun County because this is the fight they wanted to have, because it set up well, they thought, for them, the Republicans. But Loudoun County wanted nothing to do with it. This bear hug from Youngkin,
Chris Rufo,
and Rufo, right? I mean, and by the way, this has poisoned everyone, right? I mean, the vest thing is now a flop, right? DeSantis, though, in the meantime, stole Youngkin's school's shtick because it was said this is the magic formula. Now his campaign is down the toilet as well, and meanwhile,
that's our Florida colleges.
Yeah, having hired away Chris Rufo. Chris Rufo was the guy who claimed credit essentially for the victory, for Youngkin's victory in Virginia. And now it turns out to have been an illusion at best, a one-time, one-off, maybe even a mistake. And it was all based on leveraging anger in and about Loudoun County. And Loudoun County, even at the time, rejected Youngkin. Youngkin lost Loudoun County by double digits in his race. Now, yeah, so they've been running against, we're going to get rid of that school board and we're going to turn it into a Moms for Liberty school board and we're going to change the county government, et cetera, et cetera. Not only was it a no, not only is the school board still in Democratic hands, one of the current Dems on the school board, Atusa Reeser, chose this particular moment in time to say, I'm moving up. I'm running for House of Delegates in the middle of this. And the campaign was all from Republicans, all about now she wants a promotion in the middle of all that they've done so wrong. Well, she got that promotion. She's going to the House of Delegates, also on the ballot and winning
Danica
again.
Rowan is going to the Senate.
That's right. She moved up from the House to the Senate.
Traffic.
Right. And speaking of traffic, other people photographed in traffic. Second term won last night for Julie Briskman, the now Loudoun County second termer on the Board of Supervisors, the one who was famously pictured flipping off Donald Trump on his way out of the golf course. Yep. Second term for her now. It was a big night in Loudoun County.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Hey, you know what I realized today? I never say like radio people do at the end of that. I'm your host, David Waldman. I am. Here's my guest, Greg Dworkin. but you're look, podcasts. It's
I'm
different.
not your host. You're not really welcome. You're just
I
you
just
want to
saying
listen
it.
in. That's okay.
Right.
Like I don't want to pretend I'm talking to you.
Right. I forget that the rest
You
of you
talking
are
to
there.
me? You talking to me?
Yeah, this is just a phone call. Hey, did you see the election results last night? Yes. Oh, and then some other people are listening.
Right.
So,
but it requires breakfast really to be proper. So.
Oh yeah. Okay.
So House of Delegates in Virginia, 51 Democrats, they flip. It used to be 52-48. It's 51 Democrats, 47 Republicans because there's still uncalled races. There's two uncalled races. Mm-hmm. In both of them, the Republican appears to be winning by a small amount. And the problem there is that the early mail-in stuff gets counted last. May not get counted completely until Monday.
Okay.
And that may be the difference in a close race in terms of who wins and who doesn't win.
There are still a few.
So at least 51 Democrats in the House of Delegates, perhaps 52, maybe in a perfect world 53.
Hey.
But that's an enormous change, just even 51. And then on the state Senate side, 21 Democrats, 17 Republicans, And there's still a couple of outstanding races that the Times hasn't called yet.
Mm-hmm. Outstanding.
I think Diggs in Senate District 24, that's Pocosin and areas near Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads area, a little north of that.
Okay.
Monty Mason, the Democratic incumbent, was at 49. Diggs, the Republican challenger, who's a sheriff, was at 51. But that's not called yet, even though it looks like the Republicans would win that. And then Senate District 27 hasn't been called yet. So in each case, there's two outstanding, both delegates and Senate, there's two outstanding races. In a perfect world, it might fall to the Democrats if the mail-in vote is strong. But even if it doesn't, they still win the majority.
Yes.
In Ohio, you were talking about numbers. I think it was 57%, just short of that. 56.8% for yes and 43.4% for no, which is, pretty strong. Remember, the Republicans are trying to cheat and make it a 60% threshold. This is why.
Yeah. Right. They would have come away with 57%, good for you, but that's a no. The infographic I have, I think, is based on 99% of the vote being in. So still more coming in. I think I had 56.6%, but so 57 plus.
Right. There's exit polling
something
there, so we know a little bit about what's going on there. And Nick Orovich, pollster, was looking at this and said, comparing Ohio exit polls in 2023, just now, versus 2022 and Tim Ryan's Senate vote. Looking to see who voted yes on the amendment versus Ryan's vote. Unmarried men plus 19 compared to Ryan for yes.
Okay.
So, abortion rights were attractive with unmarried men, perhaps younger men. 30 to 44-year-olds plus 19, 18 to 29-year-olds plus 18. Trump voters plus 14 relative to Tim Ryan.
Okay.
Independents plus 14, moderates plus 13, Hispanic voters plus 14. So it was an across-the-board win. It wasn't driven by women. It was driven by women, but it wasn't just women.
I mean, yeah, okay. No, that's the best way of looking at it. Is like, okay, well, it was, driven by women, certainly initially, and they brought everybody else along.
And forever.
Great.
See, that's the point. This is not an issue that's going away. It's going to remain salient forever. But it's true for everybody.
Yeah.
People do not like the Republican position. And again, the Democrats had trouble a few years back trying to tie individual candidates to the Republican position. Now it's just so clear it's not difficult. It takes a while. Repetition. Adults learn by repetition and saying it over and over again. Let me repeat that. That's how it happens. And by now, it's sunk in. You guys really mean it when you say this.
Yeah.
And you don't mean it when you say you're not going to do it.
That's true, too. And that's equally important. And people have become used to the reality of the tribalism of it all within the legislatures. Like, look, even though this one said that they were for the more moderate position, the fact is that a Republican is going to end up voting for the Republican position or get his legs broken and be replaced by somebody else who will. And you know that. And it does come down to I'm voting for overall control of the legislature through the vehicle of my local candidate, and people now understand that.
It's not always the legislature. Sometimes it's the courts. We know what happened in Wisconsin, for example, and that was not that long ago. Places where they get to
vote for those courts, yeah.
This is the Philadelphia Inquirer, paywalled, unfortunately, but Pennsylvania papers are the place to look for this.
Costs money.
Dan McCaffery's triumph in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, he's the Democrat, extends Democrats' majority, abortion rights, and election integrity took center stage in the expensive and contentious showdown between the candidates. Pennsylvania is a swing state. If it's close, the people who run elections in the counties, and I still have to look at that at county level, and the courts are key. They're the ones that decide, for example, you know what, you're trying to stop early balloting, mail-in votes. Mm-hmm. I think it's the one, if I recall correctly, case that the Trump campaign won was to delay or otherwise try to neuter in one small area in Pennsylvania mail-in votes.
Is that where they did have one victory out of 60 something?
I think that was the one.
But I don't
so
even know
having
if it was sustained on
the
appeal.
Republicans nowhere near a majority in the Pennsylvania Supreme Court and the Wisconsin Supreme Court are key.
Yes.
To ensuring that when people vote, it gets honored. Because just as it's clear that Republicans try to take abortion rights away, it's also clear Republicans try to steal elections.
Yes.
Yes, I know they say
ones that have already
Democrats do it.
happened.
It's projection.
Yes, I know. Exactly right. Just like everything else but they they're trying to rig them ahead of time. And if they don't win them, that's not an obstacle in their view. They can undo them, whether that's by rioting at the Capitol in the case of a presidential election or undoing a statewide referendum if you are in the state legislature, as they say they
group
promised
says
to do
the
in Ohio.
Philadelphia Inquirer, and the candidate's campaign spent more than $20 million to win the open seat, which was the top statewide race on the ballot this fall. And by the way,
a lot of money burned here.
This is partly
Everywhere.
Jamie Harrison and the Democrats.
Okay.
And it's partly activists, and it's partly Democratic donors. But folks have gotten clued into the fact that statewide races matter, and the resources were there for these races.
Yes. And
Wasn't
a lot
always
of
true in the past.
A lot of low dollar donor money that came in and helped play in this, thanks to grassroots and online organizers who actually do the work of driving dollars there and helping people decide, all right, I want to be a part of it too. I've got a couple of bucks to spare. There's a lot of excellent work being done targeting these state level races and local level races where your money can have a huge impact, and making sure that legislatures flip. The Virginia legislature flipping the House was a huge project and a real reach. And a lot of dollars came in online this way. Charles Gaba doing a lot of that work.
Yep.
Let's see. And our Twitter / other online services pal, Bobby Bigwheel, who's all over the place too, doing the same sort of thing, pursuing their hobby, their interests and passion in digging down into these down ballot races and doing the dirty work that we don't want to do.
Danielle Nichinian,
yes.
Danielle, and Bolt's
absolutely.
Magazine.
Bolt's huge. And I'll give them a little mention here too, because they've got a big fundraiser going on at the moment where there's some sort of matching opportunity that they're talking about. You donate and the dollars are matched from a non-profit journalism institution of one kind, or I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's a matching opportunity. If you've ever appreciated what they do there at Bolts, I guess now's the time to throw in a couple. You got a couple of bucks, someone else will throw in a couple more.
Some of the only people that cover prisons, sheriffs, and some of the important stuff that actually, and voting rights for felons, just among the many things that they cover that many other people do not.
Yes. And that'll all be crucial to, like we still have results, for instance, as we got from last night in Mississippi, where, Mississippi is Mississippi. But as reminded, if you actually listened to the majority of the population there, the outcome would be different, but you can't listen to them because they're not allowed to speak.
Sounds like Ohio.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So, here's other election results that are of note. John, Wisterling brought me this one because I didn't otherwise notice it. Mm-hmm. In Michigan.
Michigan, what? Okay, yes.
Democrats have the trifecta. They
yes,
have the Senate, the
that
House,
I did know,
and the governing, the gubernatorial position there. Mm-hmm. Big Rich, but two of the House Democrats ran for mayors in local elections and won.
Okay.
So those two people are now out of the House, so the House is now tied, at least temporarily, until they're replaced. Mm. Now, those are both highly Democratic areas, so the new replacements will be Democrats, and they'll get their edge back. But it's like our own national House.
Okay.
The first black representative in Congress, I think, for Rhode Island won yesterday. So now the Democrats have one more vote for a couple of weeks.
All right.
So now the Republican majority is only 3, which makes Mike Johnson's job even harder because he cannot get anything done. That's a story I was going to get to, but John Harwood says, selecting a new speaker appears not to have solved their governing problem. While you were sleeping, says Jake Sherman, House Republican leadership pulled the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development bill from the floor, otherwise known as THUD.
Yes.
Because the bill fell with a thud. They don't have the votes.
Yeah.
And Johnson can't get anything done, and the government closes next week.
Isn't that something? He's no more effective than, what's that other guy's name? I forget already. Yeah. That they used to have. By the way, Aaron Kleinman is Bobby Big Wheel on Twitter. I know, it's like all I can remember is his online handles, but and he's been on the show too, and I still don't remember.
He's funny. I like him.
Yeah, he's an excellent follow, I would say, because one, the information is fantastic, and then the directed donation information, fantastic on top of that, super effective. I think
for a while
plus
he was
he's
using
just
his
fun.
avatar on social media, Zaphod Beeblebrox from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Is that right?
That alone won me over.
Yeah, all right. Well, I mean, he's entertaining and like a normal person, and it's fun to talk to him, and it's not all wonkery all the time. So an excellent follow, I would say, and doing great work in raising money. He really targeted the Virginia legislature hard.
Right. And interesting, awesome. In Michigan, to follow up on that story. So what do you do when you lose your majority? From a procedural point of view, firstly, they already had rules that said the speaker stays the speaker in that situation.
Good rule. I like it.
And secondly, the Democrats are considering adjourning until they get their majority back.
Why not?
It's like why not? Exactly.
Okay.
We did what we needed to do. We knew this was coming. We got all our bills passed, and we'll just adjourn until we come back. Because who's to say we can't? Yeah. I have the gavel.
That's right. That's a thing you can do. Okay. I would say that's a good choice then.
Right. This is from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, because I think this is a point that really needs to be made. Democrats dominate Election Day despite angst over Biden.
The New York Times columnist angst.
Right. This is written by
Sienna Paul. Why won't
J.
you
Balloon,
say it?
New York Times pitch bot.
Right.
But here's the paragraph I wanted to read to you.
Okay.
A bad night for former President Donald Trump. Kentucky Attorney General Dan Cameron, considered a rising GOP figure, like Glenn Youngkin, spent most of his campaign trying to tie Bashir to Biden's low approval ratings while wholeheartedly embracing Trump. When you look at his bio on Twitter, the first thing it says is, Trump endorsed GOP candidate.
Yes. Mind you, this is an attorney general bear-hugging the 90-count defendant.
Right. His defeat stung Republicans in a state that backed Trump over Biden by 26 percentage points in 2020. Meanwhile, other Republicans who steered clear of Trump in Kentucky fared better. Michael Adams, Secretary of State, who rejected Trump's election fraud lies, breezed to another term. Trump is political and electoral poison down ballot, said Chris Christie.
Yes. What do you know?
Describing Trump's embrace, Daniel Cameron's embrace of Trump as a huge mistake. Huge.
For Arrested Development fans.
And the suburbs turned out huge for Democrats and their causes. Strong turnout in the bedroom communities surrounding Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Columbus helped enshrine protections for abortion in Ohio, while Bashir's win in Kentucky was powered in part by suburban voters. Okay. Democrats in Georgia found reason to celebrate the victories and said the wins could form a playbook for 2024.
Okay.
So, let's see. Battleground Georgia, latest AJC poll of likely Georgia voters is out and shows an evenly divided electorate 1 year out in a presidential race matching Biden, a Democrat, against Trump, a Republican. The two are deadlocked, with Trump holding a 1-point lead with a margin of error of 3.1.
Okay.
So, again, this is before you start running all those ads that say, when Trump says, I killed Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
That's why you run those ads.
I would like to see them run. Right. Okay. I imagine that's first on the list. So we will see them. That is good news.
Right. Here, I'll tell you some other good news.
Yes.
The performance of George Stephanopoulos on the Sunday shows.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Why?
Because when
I
he
don't
has
watch.
Republicans on the show, he insists on asking, do you believe the 2020 election was stolen?
Okay.
This is from Jay Rosen. It comes from a CNN newsletter. Jay Rosen says, in quotes, the most fundamental question we face now, it certainly looks like George Stephanopoulos is saying that he's drawn a line. Unless he gets a clear answer, he will not move on from asking, do you believe the 2020 election was stolen? And Stephanopoulos said, you don't move on from that. This is not just another policy debate. It's fundamental. I hope Kristen Welker is reading this. Stephanopoulos declined to comment on how he believes other news anchors should approach the matter, but he said for him it's really not too complicated. We're a democracy. A democracy is decided by elections, and the peaceful transfer of power up until 2020 was at the heart of our democratic tradition.
Yes.
So just like until last night, analysts and operatives were discounting, not so much on the Democratic side, the power and salience of a post-Dobbs, post-Roe world. People still discount January 6th because MAGA people don't care.
Yeah, I mean,
I know they don't care.
It's hard.
They cared so much that they elected Daniel Cameron, right?
Right.
Wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because, if all your information is, well, they don't care, they don't change their minds, you have to be reminded from them. You know what? It actually doesn't matter if they change their minds.
Exactly. The 35% of
you
the
don't
vote.
believe it.
Who cares if they don't change their mind?
Yeah. I mean, I hate it and it's infuriating, but don't, the best revenge is living well, right? Go win the election and let them be frustrated. And some of them will go back to being low propensity voters if they keep losing.
Yeah.
So that would be nice. I don't know, whatever the hell else. I had something else, but it doesn't matter. But, by the way, so what Bolt's and their matching program, it is a program called News Match, which I do think is strictly for like nonprofit news organizations. So like that'll work for Bolts and maybe like not me, but the point is they're having their fundraiser. And if you follow Taniel, and if you don't, you should, you can go and you can go over to, if you're at their boltsmag.org website, there's a donate page, and that explains the whole thing about their match. And because I didn't say the website before, where Aaron Kleinman is working, it's statesproject.org. They too are all about that stuff, and they too could use your support. So there you go. And I don't know, other than collecting donations directly for the candidates, I don't think there's any way that you can throw money at Charles Gaba, but you could try. He may donate it to candidates, though, and that's not a bad thing.
Right. There's no one site that you can go to say, okay, here's a roundup of all the school board elections.
That's interesting.
Which is really too bad because there should be.
Yeah, there's a niche. We can start that. I don't think I have the bandwidth to do that, but someone should.
Yeah.
You there, who want to, over there.
Yeah, it's a niche.
You, the one that wants the blue sky code.
Because a niche is a notch.
Yeah.
It's an old Abbott Costello routine.
Well, okay.
But, when you're as old as I am, you remember that stuff.
This is cultural background that we all need. Touchstones. Yeah, okay.
Exactly right.
And like Lil Abner, as it turns out. So, okay. Very good night there. And
you never sent me that piece your mom sent you.
I didn't send it? Oh, okay.
On General Boomless.
Why did I not do that? You tell me why, and then if you're right...
Don't tell me. Tell your mom why.
Yeah. Okay. I didn't send it. I thought I read it, but...
maybe I'll just have your mom send it to me directly.
Sure. You could try that. Why not? I'll dig it up. I don't know whether... Well, yeah. Was it a I think she was just... I don't know what it was.
You had
recounting. What is it? Where am I? What day is it?
I want you to tell me what it was so I can send it to you. I don't know what it was. You didn't send it to me.
How do you... It's like being back in grade school. Teacher, how do you spell it? Look it up in the dictionary. How the hell am I supposed to do that? I got no idea what it is.
I don't know how to spell it.
Yeah, that's the issue. Well, I actually did ask that at one point. And anyway, I think everybody did.
I have to read you. This is one of my favorite curmudgeons, Tom Nichols, writing in The Atlantic.
Okay.
Okay.
All
and
curmudgeons all
Tom
the
Nichols and
time,
I
Atlantic.
occasionally chat on Twitter. You know, he's
Yeah.
famous, I'm not. But interestingly,
Hmm.
you know, what would happen is Tom would say something along the lines of, you know, I'm a never Trumper. I'm a never Trumper forever. It's really important. And I would say something like, great message. And he'd say, shut up, commie. And so, you know, we have a great relationship in that regard. Point being that he wrote on Twitter the other day, okay, I finally finished making the first steps in my journey. I voted for a tax increase.
Oh,
I am now on my way to
exciting.
socialism. It was a bond issue to fund a school in my town, but, you know, I voted yes. And so I told him, way to go, comrade. You know,
Yes.
that's really good. So anyway, the same Tom Nichols.
Bond issue, and now you've bonded. So excellent.
Yeah. Writes in the Atlantic, Trump plots against his enemies. Inauguration day could be a national disaster. And he talks about all the ways that Trump is actually telling us he wants to be a dictator.
Right.
And he says, you know, Trump is, to put it mildly, an emotionally disordered man, but he's going to do these things.
Okay.
But Trump hasn't taken out billboards, but at his rallies and press events, he's shouting it as loud as he can. Meanwhile, and this is the interesting part, millions of voters are folding their arms like shirty children.
Shirty children.
S-H-I-R-T-Y.
This
Shirty
must be
children
one of those things
threatening
I'm
to
not
sit
old
out the
enough to
election
understand.
because they don't like their choices.
Shirty.
Right? You want the blue shirt or the red shirt? You got to wear a shirt.
I guess so.
That's what he means.
Shirty.
Right? That's what we used to say to our 4-year-olds when they didn't want to. I don't want that. I don't want. Well, okay, listen. You get to choose. I want to pick. Okay, you get to pick. It's the blue one or the red one.
Yeah.
Because otherwise we'll be here all day and you got to go to school. Some are threatening to withhold support, in particular for Joe Biden, if they don't get their way about student loans, climate change, policy toward Israel. They're living in a booming economy that's outperforming any other developed nation since the start of the pandemic on many measures, and they're miserable and angry about it. Now, many voters resent hearing all of this. They think they're being bullied into a binary choice between two candidates they don't like, and so they engage in wish casting. If only somebody could beat Trump. If only Biden would step down. He won't. If only America didn't rely on the Electoral College. It does. And so on and so forth. Trump and Biden are headed for a showdown unless illness or death intervenes. And even if Trump goes to prison, the Republican Party's become so fully corrupted, he could likely still run and get the nomination anyway. And the Electoral College isn't going anywhere either. So if American democracy falls in 2024, the chief culpability will rest with Trump, his aides, and the elected Republicans. But if Trump manages one last time to squeeze 271 electoral votes out of a distracted and sullen American electorate, much of the blame will also rest with voters who couldn't be bothered to put aside their petty beefs and particularistic interests long enough to link arms at the ballot and defend the American system of government. You know, people don't like hearing that. And they don't like eating the vegetables. The vegetables are good for you, and he's right.
Okay. That's shirty
Shirty.
of them, I guess. Yeah. So, all right.
People
Wow.
have a
I
really
learned
shirty
something.
choice. You know, they have to have this guy or the other guy.
Yeah, this is some real bullshit right here, I guess. All right. I mean, my first thought was, is that what they're trying to get
onto
at?
a discussion of farm equipment.
They just want to be able to say this on TV? Shirty. But okay. It's real. It's real in Britain, apparently.
Yep.
So, okay. I'll live with it. Meanwhile, I did, my mom heard you. She resent the thing.
Thank you.
And I put it in, what the hell's that other thing we use?
Thank you, David's mom.
Skype. Yes. Okay. So there you go. You got a link for it. It's all real now because there's a link.
Yeah, and I'm going to read it too.
All right. And I don't want you shirting around here.
Yeah, well, this was an episode that happened in 1953, and I was born in 1954, and I don't remember it.
So there you go.
Thank you for sending it.
Okay. Yeah, you can never be too damn old around here, I guess.
That's what I'm thinking.
All right. Very good. Wow. All right. So overall, good night. I think we plugged a lot of people who did some excellent work to make the day
They did.
possible.
There were people working hard on this, and they deserve credit.
Yes. In fact, also sitting in my my messages inbox is the chairman of the Loudoun County Democrats recounting the night's events. I mean, we happen to do particularly well in my corner of Loudoun County, but he is reminding that organizing matters, essentially. One of his last comments here. Our coordinated campaign probably saved a couple of seats that we didn't think would be close, but we wound up way tighter than we thought it would be. And so, yeah, it wasn't a romp everywhere in Loudoun County, but because Loudoun County Democrats were organized and out in force, they saved a couple of local elections and a couple of other seats that then contributed, even legislative seats that contributed to the flipping of the legislature in Virginia. Everything counts. I mean, everybody knows that every vote counts, but every organization counts. And even in places...
Speaking of every organization, I have to thank the other unsung heroes here in Newtown, and that would be the Girl Scouts, because they sell cookies at every election in Newtown. That's what keeps the voters coming out to vote.
Look,
they were there early in the morning. They were there late at night. And thank you to them, because not only do they bring voters out to the polls with good results, we get cookies.
Yeah. And people get something to eat online, and sometimes that's controversial. And can they do that in Georgia, for instance? Can you sell Girl Scout cookies? If you're selling the stuff, I guess that's still okay.
Most people, buy it on the way out rather than on the way in.
Oh, okay. But still, it's a treat for going out. It's better than the sticker. I mean, I like the stickers and all, but can't.
And boy, if you were wondering whether capitalism is dead and you want to meet some local entrepreneurs, just talk to the Girl Scouts.
Okay.
They'll sell you anything.
All right.
Even though you didn't think you were going to.
I'll sell you my little brother. Here you go, take him. Yeah. All right. Well, look, all sorts of things bring people out to the polls. There's motivation for everything, and I guess in combination with all of the marijuana legalizations, it's extremely important that you have something to eat.
Well, see, that's the whole thing, right? I mean, if there's ever a ballot to legalize marijuana, and this was decided in our state legislature, not on the ballot box, but absolutely you'd want the Girl Scouts selling cookies.
Right. And don't tell we're not telling the kids why they're selling so many cookies. That's fine. But, they're very important. Anything that brings...
Didn't you already buy 3 boxes? Yeah, but,
But I really enjoyed it. I had a very positive feeling about it for some reason.
They were really good.
So, all right. Well, thank you, Greg. And we get to go over even more of this tomorrow.
And thank you, David Spot.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Remember, I was going to tell you that I'm your host, David Waldman. It's true. I don't know. Does that sound too radio-ish? I mean, this is, generally speaking, you have to find your way here. You're not driving along just flipping channels on the radio. That's kind of why I never did that. But I don't know. Maybe I would make myself more famous or something if I did do that. All right, listen. I have some things to catch up on. Over various parts of the results from yesterday, including Ohio. I mentioned to you that there's going to be some pushback. And I mentioned to you, of course, I think we actually probably explained pretty well. Remember when Ohio Republicans were trying to screw with the way this election would be administered, how it would work, what the rules would be. I'll just add here more coherent thoughts, I guess, from Steve Bannon at the Maddow blog, who wrote for this morning: Ohio voters reject Republican tactics and back abortion rights. That's the basics of it, Here's how. As one observer put it, when you do everything you can to rig an election and still lose, you have a problem. And I don't know, maybe that's all you really need to hear from that. But, Steve's pretty good and makes some good points usually. So, and this isn't terribly long, so let's run through it. When it came to defeating a proposed state constitutional amendment on abortion rights, Ohio Republicans tried everything they could think of to win. That's what the backstory we were discussing earlier in the show, just informally and without links, etc. But now you can have the links, courtesy of Steve Bannon. They tried to force proponents to get 60% of the vote. That was just such an interesting move when I think about it, about all the people who will tell you that the filibuster and everything about it is anti-democratic and backwards and crazy. And then you ask them, well, would you like to have that complication stand in the way of registering the approval or disapproval of the voters directly? No, of course they're not going to want that extra layer of crap. So I'm amazed that they lost that, but they did, thankfully. So they tried purging registered Ohioans Ohioans from the voter rolls, which they were going to try to do anyway, but they did with, I guess, just that much more gusto this time, and it didn't work. They added needlessly provocative unborn child phrasing to the literal wording of the initiative as it appeared on the ballot. Don't forget about that one. And GOP leaders in the state even lied to the public about the implications of the measure. More on that from the Columbus Dispatch in just a minute, but keep that one in mind because that's particularly irritating. And that's a very gentle way of putting what they actually said, that they lied to the public about the implications of the measure. But moving on, the party and its allies thought it'd be enough, especially in Ohio, which has become reliably red state, a red state. They thought wrong. NBC News reported that the state's voters have added the right to access to abortion care to the state's constitution. And how did NBC report it? The passage of the Issue 1 ballot measure inserts language in the state constitution guaranteeing every person in Ohio the right to, quote, to one's own reproductive medical treatment, including but not limited to abortion, unquote, and barring the state from, quote, burdening, penalizing, or prohibiting, unquote, those rights. Though it specifies that abortion will remain prohibited after the point a doctor judges a fetus would most likely survive birth, with exceptions to protect the woman's life or health. It wasn't especially close, Steve continues. With nearly all the votes counted, proponents of reproductive rights appear to have prevailed by more than 13 points. I'm reminded of a line the Washington Post's E.J. Dionne wrote in a column published over the summer, and here it is. When you do everything you can to rig an election and still lose, you have a problem. NBC News' report added that the success of Issue 1, quote, will effectively counteract the state's heartbeat bill, and I would say, quote unquote, heartbeat bill, I guess, which took effect immediately after the Dobbs decision and banned most abortions, with exceptions for the health of the pregnant woman and ectopic pregnancies, but remains temporarily blocked by a state judge, thankfully. A Washington Post analysis added that Ohio has become the 7th state to vote to protect access to abortion in a statewide initiative since Roe v. Wade was overturned by the Supreme Court last year. 4 of those initiatives were on the ballot in states that Joe Biden lost in the 2020 election. In all 7, the abortion access position outperformed Biden's support in the state. So, since the demise of Roe, how many statewide votes on abortions have Republicans won? Literally none. Okay. And again, it used to be their mantra to leave it to the states, but they only meant leave it to the states as, you'll have your opportunity to be heard later. In the meantime, we're going to impose a national solution by overturning Roe v. Wade, or at least working all these years to it, or restricting abortions more and more, even when Roe v. Wade was still in place. And they kept saying, you'll have your day. We'll end up leaving it to the states. But they, of course, thought that they would win in most states, and certainly in most or all red states. And in fact, they have lost in every place that they have contested it so far. So that's important. All right, I mentioned to you that there was more from the Columbus Dispatch that would, let's say, illuminate that passing reference that Steve made. How many do I have more than one version of this open? I'm not really sure. But what was it that we called out? Oh, yes, right. That GOP leaders in Ohio lied to the public about the implications of the measure. I happen to have skimmed this Columbus Dispatch piece, and I think I know what they're talking about, even though there's a link there. And maybe I should have followed his link to see if there is actually at least one more egregious example of all of this. I don't know. Let me see. I'll go back to this. This is an editorial, actually, from the Akron Beacon Journal that Steve links to. But first, let me read this piece, and because I'm excited to read this one. And then we'll see what happened in Akron. This from Haley B. Miller. That's what it look at. Haley B. Miller, like as a D. Santis. This is B, with the B as in boy, B. Miller. I've never seen anything like that. But anyway, Columbus Dispatch writer. Will of the voters? ? Ohio Republicans pledge to push back on abortion and the marijuana initiative that won last night as well. Because, of course, their issues are super popular and help them at the polls. And kind of like, yeah, all right, I guess go ahead, make it an issue again. Ohio State Senate President, not the Ohio State, but Ohio, the state, Senate President Matt Huffman said voters could see abortion issues on the ballot again in the future. Okay. Are you sure you want to try that? A majority of Ohio voters on Tuesday chose to enshrine abortion rights in the state constitution and legalize recreational marijuana. Very upsetting to conservatives, I'm sure. Almost immediately, the state's top Republican leaders promised they would try to unravel what the voters approved. Super popular with voters these days. Unofficial results show about 57% of voters backed Issue 1. That's the constitutional amendment that codifies the right to abortion, access, and other reproductive health care. Issue 2, which also passed with 57% of the vote, as if there was intention here, is a state law that will allow adults 21 and over to buy, possess, and grow marijuana. It's a farm bill. Both take effect in 30 days. I can't believe that in 2023 we're actually talking about elected officials not respecting the will of the voters and not respecting the outcome of an election, said Tom Herron, who's apparently been asleep for a little while, maybe because he's spokesperson for the Coalition to Regulate Marijuana Like Alcohol, by which I guess maybe he meant I should have some and not be aware of what's going on nationwide politically. I don't know. That seems like kind of an out-of-touch statement. But I have a feeling that at bottom he'll say, oh, yeah, I absolutely know. But okay, he just wanted to say, I can't believe in 2023 something. But okay, I think that every single voter in Ohio has a right to expect that elected officials will implement and respect the will of the voters. Well, you have the right to wish that that were true. But have you seen the Republican Party lately? Because I'd like to introduce the two of you, if you haven't. So since issue 2, the marijuana one, is an initiated statute, whatever that might mean, that's what they call it, lawmakers, because of this, can easily change it, which means they will try. And they were promising to do so even before the election. House Speaker Jason Stevens, a Republican, of course, said Tuesday night that the legislature should reallocate tax revenue from the adult use program to invest more in, what do they need more of? Jail construction and law enforcement training. Of course, they'll have their hands, far fewer marijuana defendants as a result, but I'm sure there's something else that they could arrest you for. And they'll get around to it. Like, for instance, if you were thinking maybe you would vote to preserve the will of the voters and defend the rights to an abortion and to marijuana legalization in the next election when Republicans bring it up again, maybe they'll arrest you for that and put you in one of the new jails that they build. Then you won't be able to. And then they'll win, quote unquote. Stevens's home, Lawrence County, in case you were wondering, voted in favor of issue 2, as did several other reliably Republican counties. Now, despite that, Senate President Matt Huffman, also a Republican, has a full list of changes he wants to make. How do you know? How do you like that? The results just came in last night, but he's got a full list of ways that he wants to say F you to those changes. This statute was written by the marijuana industry, that huge juggernaut, big marijuana, and should not be treated as a cash grab for their cash crop at the expense of a state trying to emerge from the opioid epidemic. He's invoking one drug against the next. And as you know, Republicans are very, very anti-industry cash grabs at the expense of the state budget. They're constantly railing against that and doing everything they can to make sure that industries don't get money from the government to do the things that they think would be good for that industry. No Republicans anywhere like that, right? Of course. Well, they found an industry they don't like. The General Assembly, he goes on to say, may consider amending the statute to clarify the questionable language regarding limits for THC and tax rates, as well as other parts of the statute. I'm admitting I don't know very much about what is in the statute. I'm not from Ohio. Maybe there's something that they want to tinker with. Maybe they have grounds to stand on. I don't know. But they're letting you know that they don't have very much respect for the voters speaking directly. You would think that they would then lose their next elections and be replaced by Democrats, but that's where gerrymandering comes in. And, of course, various other bits of fear-mongering. Now, we had thought that maybe that, Republicans would have some success fear-mongering over, well, abortion and marijuana legalization and transgender rights and wokeism, and because they keep promising us on social media that these are very powerful motivators, but as it turns out, they very frequently lose. So I don't know, but they don't learn lessons very quickly. So maybe they need to shoot themselves in the other foot also, and maybe I don't know what. With the cowboy boots that they're wearing, they may have to just riddle their footwear with bullets in order to hit a foot. You never know where the foot is in some of these things that they wear. So, anyway, here's why I wanted to bring you the Columbus Dispatch article. What Ohio Republicans are saying about Issue 1, the abortion amendment. The two GOP leaders issued similar warnings about the abortion amendment, even though it's difficult to repeal a constitutional amendment once it's on the books. And I guess that's something, I don't know what kind of leeway they have or where there are places that they can trip up the process. But remember, okay, the voters have approved the thing. It's not yet official, right? They haven't declared that to be the result yet, even though everybody knows that that's going to win. Then what? Okay, we've passed a constitutional amendment. Well, what's the procedure at this point? Who writes it down? Who officially says this is now part of the Constitution, and how quickly do they have to do it? Earlier in the article, this one or Steve Bannon's, I can't remember which one it was, that said that there's 30 days involved, right? You got 30 days to do it. But with these Republicans, you have to ask, well, what happens if 31 days go by and it's not in there? And what does it mean to be in there? Does it have to be in there on the website? Do they send a note to everybody? Does everybody have to notarize something that says, I acknowledge that this is part of the Constitution now? There's a process. I just don't know what it is. And if there are Republicans in charge of executing various pieces of the process, what happens if they decide not to execute that? I mean, there's an answer, and you're supposed to then be able to go to court and sue and da-da-da. But, remember that the Ohio Republican governor's son is on the Supreme Court there, and they fought this, and they lost, along the way in trying to rig how the results would be read for issue 1. But, in a world where we just lived through the January 6th insurrection and we have an entire political party occupying and still holding on to the majority in the House of Representatives at the federal level that says the election outcome wasn't the election outcome, except insofar as it elected us, like, I guess anything's possible. So I guess we have to watch out. So here's the deal, right? The two GOP leaders issued similar warnings about the abortion amendment, even though it's difficult to repeal a amendment once it's on the books. Of course, it's not. I guess it's less difficult to repeal it if it never makes it to the books somehow. Both Huffman and Stevens supported a failed effort in August to make it harder to change the Constitution, which aimed to thwart the abortion amendment. Stevens said Tuesday's vote isn't the end of the conversation. The legislature has, as he says, multiple paths that we will explore to continue to protect innocent life. Or screw with the voters. Huffman echoed that sentiment, suggesting voters could see abortion issues on the ballot again in the future. Like we say, great, because, it brings out Democratic voters, but maybe not so great because it also may mean that elections just mean less and less every time. Whenever there's a Republican majority around, they'll just simply declare that not to be the result. They declare Biden not to be the president, and they're even attempting mightily to actually impeach him from the position. But or impeach him so that he could be removed from the position, if you want to be technical about it. And we always want to be technical about it. So they go on to threaten more things. Life is worth fighting for. As a grandparent of 8, there's lots of grandparents of 8 who still support abortion rights, but he's special as a grandparent of 8. The life of a baby is always worth the fight, Huffman said. The national abortion industry, again, another industry they don't like, funded by wealthy out-of-state special interests. Because obviously nobody in Ohio likes abortion rights except 57% of you. Anyway, they out-of-state special interests spent millions to pass this, ready for this, radical language. And I read it to you, right? You can have your own health care, prenatal health care, reproductive health care of all sorts, including the right to an abortion. So radical. But ready for this? The national abortion industry funded by wealthy out-of-state special interests spent millions to pass this radical language that goes far past abortion on demand. There's more that he says here. This isn't the end. It's really just the beginning of a revolving door of ballot campaigns to repeal or replace issue 1. So they're going to insist on putting this straight up right back on the ballot. Shall we repeal this constitutional amendment you just adopted by a 57% vote? Now, the answer will be no, by about 57%, probably. But notice what went on in the middle of all this. This is radical language. Well, it's not. It's very anodyne language. It's very basic language, but goes far past abortion on demand. Okay, that, I think, is what they were talking about when they say, well, GOP leaders in the state even lied to the public about the implications of the measure. That may not be what Steve Bannon is referring to. He's referring to whatever is in the Akron Beacon Journal editorial, which now I want to go and see if that is in fact what they're talking about. But here, I mean, how could this not be the case that Republican leaders are lying in this sense about the implications of the language? They say it's radical. It's pretty clear that it's not. But how do you go past at all? Not only that, far past abortion on demand. I mean, isn't that kind of the end point? There's a terminal point for liberalization of abortion access, right? Abortion on demand. If somebody who's pregnant says, I want an abortion, and it doesn't matter, in my view, when in the pregnancy that happens, day 1, right up to birth, that's abortion on demand, I guess, in the strictest sense, even though that's not legal anywhere and never has been and has almost no support. But, okay, but to go far past abortion on demand, the only thing that could possibly be is they're telling you, well, if this passes, they can just randomly abort your children on the street, even if you want to be pregnant. They're going to look for pregnant people, tackle them, and abort their children at random on the street. Pregnant people, well, maybe this is why maybe this is why they say it. Pregnant women have to stay home forever and never leave their homes. And that's kind of what they were hoping for anyway. But because if you do, you'll be tackled by a Democrat and they'll abort your baby against your will. I mean, what does it mean to say it goes far past abortion on demand? You don't even have to demand it. In fact, you could be actively opposed to it for yourself, and they're going to do it to you anyway, by force. I mean, what kind of nonsense is this? How out of touch do you have to be? Now, there's more from the Columbus Dispatch. A spokesman for Governor Mike DeWine declined to comment Tuesday night. That was wise of him. Democrats, for their part, said the election proved Ohioans support abortion access. I mean, it does. And don't want the GOP-controlled legislature restricting it. Well, I don't want that either. I never underestimate with this Republican supermajority that is drunk on power what they will plan to do, House Minority Leader Allison Russo, the Democrat, said. But at the end of the day, the people of Ohio have spoken very loudly and clearly on the issue, not just tonight, but also in August, that they want abortion rights and they want personal freedom. It's like an alliance defending freedom of some sort, perhaps, you might say. So, just a warning, though. I mean, thinking about, let's see, other issues of the past like marriage equality, where, despite all the protestations by Republicans, marriage equality is legalized, recognized in certain states, and certain county clerks, for instance, would say, well, I don't care. I'm not going to issue the marriage license. I'm just not. You're going to have to sue me to force me to do it. And then even if I lose the case, I'll just resign. I'm just not doing it. Like, what happens if the clerk, whoever is supposed to inscribe this thing on the Constitution and make it official, just says, well, I'm not coming to work that day. Or I'm going to write the opposite and see if anybody notices. I guess, in a post-January 6th world, you have to entertain all of these possibilities. And what if we break in and steal the electoral vote certificates and burn them all so that they can't count them? Well, there's redundancy built into the system. And, that's too many words. I don't want to read about that. But in any case, we'll break into the judges' chambers and burn them there too. What if we just don't? What if Mike Pence just says the opposite of what these papers say? What if he just reads the fake paper? They tried all of this. That was all in their plans. So, democracy, meh, in their view. Despite the fact that, I remember now what I was going to say to Greg, too, before, when he was talking about George Stephanopoulos. Kudos to him. Does he stop the interview if they say, yeah, I think the election was stolen? I'm not certain what the consequences are, but they must have been demonstrated by now. But he won't move off the question anyway. So it's interesting. I guess the next step is also I'm not having you back on the show because it's useless. Like, what's the point of the Sunday talk shows about politics and elections and democracy if there aren't elections and democracy, I guess? Maybe it needs to be put that way. I'm sure it's already been put that way to journalists who aren't doing their part in upholding the sanctity of democracy and elections. But some of them are slowly coming around. Anyway, just quickly, let's take a look at the Akron Beacon Journal. This is what was linked to what Steve Bannon used to bolster his point that GOP leaders in Ohio had lied to the public about the implications of the measure. Vote on issue 1 based on your beliefs and what it really says, not Republican lies. This is an editorial by the Akron Beacon Journal editorial board. Published on November 2nd. So last week, I guess, ahead of a lot of the early voting that was still left to be done. And of course, election day. What's the deal? A political campaign fearing it's about to lose often becomes more desperate in the final days before voters cast their ballots. In Ohio, Republicans have been in full panic mode since they lost the August 8th special election, which was itself a rigging. Anyway, where a strong majority of voters saw through their assault on citizen rights and refused to change the state's constitution. This Tuesday, Ohio voters, that's yesterday now, will decide whether to buck the state's Republicans again by approving Issue 1, a constitutional amendment guaranteeing a woman's right to an abortion and other reproductive decisions. Polls consistently suggest about 57% or more of Ohioans support abortion rights. I guess they did that polling pretty well. Or at least the polling on it was accurate close to Election Day. I wonder what the polling was on it a year ago. Anyway, the unpopularity of Republican views on abortion is no secret to party leaders. It's why they tried to trick voters in August, wrote misleading ballot language. That too is linked. And I guess they're using the unborn child language and maybe some other stuff, and misinterpreting issue 1 and have made repeated false statements about the issue. Although it doesn't, right now it hasn't said what those statements were, but it does link to repeated false statements. If they don't tell us in this thing, I guess we're going to have to click on that. It's a good way to get extra clicks for the news industry. No, issue 1 does not take away parental rights for their minor children, nor does it allow late-term abortions unless the mother's health is at risk. Partial birth abortions already banned by federal law. And I just remind you that Donald Trump is still running around the country saying they'll even allow abortion after birth, up to 75 years of age. I don't know what his limit is on all of that, but Yeah, he continues to lie about that. And no, these claims are not typical spin, the art of making public arguments supporting your candidate or positions. It's lying to the public. Even worse, Ohio Republicans are wasting taxpayer money to spread misinformation on a state-sponsored website. And our governor, who signed a bill banning abortion in Ohio before most women even know they're pregnant, is being disingenuous when he suggests conservative lawmakers may be willing to approve a more relaxed abortion law. They could have done that already, but they have not even held hearings on the concept. Instead, there's a good chance that the conservative Ohio Supreme Court will reinstate the so-called heartbeat law if voters reject Issue 1. They have not, of course. As we wrote a few weeks ago, if you believe life begins at conception and you oppose abortion, please vote no. But if you are on the fence about this important decision, we urge you to read the text below before casting your vote. Ignore the false ballot language. This is the amendment we're being asked to approve. We'll read it after this. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. We'll continue on. I don't know. There's maybe like it's. Is there any way to focus too much on what happened in Ohio yesterday? I mean, if there is, it's by focusing on what happened in Ohio before what happened last night in Ohio. But just to give you some background, now I guess maybe now, when this sort of thing, now that the results are in and everybody can be happy about the results, this sort of thing can fade from memory. But you should not lose sight of this, not in Ohio, not elsewhere, that there are still shenanigans out there. Although in skimming down in this Ohio or the Akron Beacon Journal editorial, when they begin to quote the language of the actual amendment, there's an answer to one of our key questions in here. So we got to continue at this point. We left off by noting that the editorial says, look, if you're on the fence about this important decision about abortion rights, we urge you to read the text below before casting your vote. Ignore the false ballot language. This is the amendment we're being asked to approve. If Ohio's Republican leaders believe in their positions, why must they lie to win? Well, the answer is because they believe in their positions despite all evidence to the contrary and the will of the actual voters. If they believe in their positions, they do. Why must they lie to win? Because they're unpopular. That's why. They believe in an unpopular position. And the important part, and this has implications everywhere, up to and including the guy we've spent the rest of the week on so far, Mike Johnson, he too believes what he believes, and to hell with the rest of you. He believes it in this way. I believe I'm right, and I also believe God knows I'm right and wants me to be right, and that all of this opposition from the rest of you is just another one of his crazy tests that he throws in the way once in a while to test our faith. Is it, am I going to stick to my position despite the fact that everyone has said no to this position and we live in a secular democracy? Well, the answer to that obviously is, well, no, we don't. We don't live in first of all, we don't live in a democracy. It's a republic. Oh my God. And second of all, no, we don't live in a secular anything. This is a Christian country. The Bible says so. The Bible says nothing about it. Doesn't matter. But if you can convince yourself everything's rigged against us, even though we're the ones rigging things and losing all the time. And even though we're compelled by law to do this, we're just going to say, no, we're not. And at any rate, it doesn't matter because there's no such thing as law, because there's no such thing as democracy, because God tells us all what to do. And that's that. And how can you oppose God? And they're going to stand pat and say these things. Why must they lie to win? Because no one else believes in that. Why do they continue to lie to win anyway? Or no, they don't even lie to win. They lie and lose and then say, since I was lying anyway, I guess I'll also lie about whether or not I lost. Why not? Just try, and I guess that's why we pound our head against the wall and say, oh my God, that we're in such danger. We are in danger, not of losing the votes, but of what happens after we win the votes and they decide, let's maybe, for the cause of life, murder everyone anyway and see if we can't get our way that way. All right. Well, the editorial continues. So why must they lie to win? And here is the text that they were asking you to read. Text of issue 1. Article 1, Section 22, the right to reproductive freedom with protections for health and safety. This is, I guess, the proposed text to be added to the Constitution that was approved last night. So it will go where? In Article 1, and it will be Section 22. A. Every individual has the right to make and carry out one's own reproductive decisions, including but not limited to decisions on contraception, fertility treatment, continuing one's own pregnancy, miscarriage care, and abortion. B. The state shall not, directly or indirectly, burden, penalize, prohibit, interfere with, or discriminate against either an individual's voluntary exercise of this right or a person or entity that assists an individual exercising this right, unless the state demonstrates that it is using the least restrictive means to advance the individual's health in accordance with widely accepted and evidence-based standards of care. I mean, it's dry and technical, but this is what's actually was being proposed to be added to the Constitution. But of course, in Ohio, where Republicans run the legislature, the language that was on the ballot was, well, should we approve this thing, something, unborn child, yada, yada, not actually just putting the language out in front of everybody. By the way, the language continues in Section B. However, abortion may be prohibited after fetal viability, but in no case may such an abortion be prohibited if, in the professional judgment of the pregnant patient's treating physician, it is necessary to protect the pregnant patient's life or health. Section C, as used in this section, or I guess subsection C, as used in this section, that'll be Section 22, fetal viability means the point in a pregnancy when, in the professional judgment of the pregnant patient's treating physician, the fetus has a significant likelihood of survival outside the uterus with reasonable measures. This is determined on a case-by-case basis. And lastly, state includes any governmental entity and any political subdivision. So no towns, counties, what have you, can't adopt their own ideas about this. And now the answer to our question, what will become Article 1, Section 22, I don't know whether they say clause, subsection D. The answer to the question, what do you have to do to get this on the books? D. This section is self-executing. Period. End of sentence, end of subsection. What does that mean? Well, as we understand it when we examine these things in congressional procedure, self-executing means it takes care of itself. That no matter what people may try to do, what clerks may object to doing their job or refuse to show up to do their work, or if everybody says, I'm not going to type that into the website that displays the official copy of the Ohio State Constitution, and therefore it's not in there anymore. It's not there. I won't put it in. Doesn't matter. Self-executing. This declares that Article 1, Section 22 is, despite anybody's objections or obstructions, a part of the Constitution, the end, period, end of sentence. Except that when you go to enforce that right and you go to court over something and say, it doesn't matter that they've refused to inscribe it or put it on the website or whatever the hell they do. It's self-executing. It says so right in the language. Well, I guess the Ohio Supreme Court has the ability to say, we hold that in this case it doesn't mean that. It just doesn't. And, that's crazy and you people don't understand and that's not what the law means. And I know. But as we've been telling you, these Supreme Court, particularly where they're elected in Ohio, these Supreme Court justices are political actors, whether they like it or not. And can they do this? And is there no appeal from it? Well, maybe not so much at the state level, but certainly at the federal level, we appear to be stuck with that. But inside state law, as far as state law is concerned, not that you can't make a federal claim out of it, I guess. You could try to, I don't know what the federal claim would be, except, equal protection and the right to a Republican form of government being implicated here. If you just say, to hell with what the voters say, we're just going to reverse based on nothing. But that's in the first instance, the answer to the question. Nobody has to inscribe anything. It's self-executing. So I'm glad we got to that. Now, along the way, there was something that was said in this second-hand, third-hand article that we were reading about. The Akron Beacon Journal editorial board said that Republicans had made repeated false statements about issue 1. We read at least one of them, but which ones were they referring? They were referring to ones reported also by the Akron Beacon Journal back on October 27th. A guest columnist, Daniel T. Cobill, who is a professor at Capital University Law School, who wrote this piece. There are a lot of despicable lies about issue 1, and it looks like maybe there's a typo in the headline, and it probably was supposed to read, here's the 3 nastiest of them, I guess. And so what does he have to say? In the face of broad bipartisan support for issue 1 and its protection of reproductive freedom, abortion opponents have desperately sought to portray it as, quote, too extreme. And that's where we heard the Republican leaders in Steve Bannon's piece go. These efforts are based on outright misrepresentations about the current state of Ohio law and about what issue 1 would accomplish if passed. The most fundamental falsehood that opponents have put forth is the assertion that Ohio's current law on abortion, which issue 1 would replace, is somehow a reasonable compromise. In fact, Ohio's new post-Roe ban on abortion is among the nation's most restrictive. They just decided that people would go away and forget about it why don't we just say it's a reasonable compromise? Some people will actually believe that. But current law, or prior to last night, what was current law, prohibits all abortions after cardiac activity can be detected in the fetus as early as 6 weeks. This is well before many women even know they are pregnant. Ohio's law also contains no exceptions for rape or incest. Prior to being temporarily stayed by an Ohio court, these radical restrictions forced a 10-year-old rape victim in Columbus to travel to Indiana to terminate her pregnancy so that she was not compelled to give birth to her rapist's child. The only reason Ohioans are today not forced to flee the state in similar manner is that the lower court judge temporarily paused the 6-week ban, allowing our previous law to stay in place for the time being. However, if issue 1 fails, and thankfully it did not, legal observers believe that the majority of the Ohio Supreme Court would quickly issue a ruling that would reinstate the 6-week ban. This is not mere speculation. At least 3 of the 7 justices have made public statements critical of abortion rights, which in Wisconsin gets you threatened with an impeachment, by the way. And a majority of the court recently ruled in favor of anti-abortion groups by allowing ballot language on issue 1 that is inflammatory and highly misleading. Buoyed by a public rejection of Issue 1, this anti-abortion majority would almost certainly allow enforcement of the 6-week ban to resume. Now, another one, it's not about sex reassignment surgery and doesn't take away parental consent. Why do we say this? Well, opponents of abortion, unwilling to argue for the status quo on the merits, also falsely assert that the amendment is aimed at depriving parents of their ability to help children decide whether to seek abortion or, quote, sex changes. How did that enter into it? We don't know. Yet the amendment's text protects individuals' reproductive decisions and says nothing about gender affirmation care. The listed freedoms in Issue 1 all pertain to the freedom of women and men that were cast into doubt by the Dobbs decision. It expressly guarantees individuals the right to make their own reproductive decisions and lists contraception, fertility treatment, continuing one's own pregnancy, miscarriage care, and abortion. End of quote. Contrary to opponents' assertions, the amendment also says nothing about invalidating Ohio's longstanding law requiring parental consent rules for minors seeking abortions. This statute provides that an unemancipated minor must obtain the consent of one parent to obtain an abortion, unless a judge has found that the abortion is, quote, in the best interests of the minor. The amendment does not purport to affect this statute, and if Issue 1 passes, it will not automatically invalidate any law other than the 6-week ban. Even during the Roe era, Ohio successfully defended before the U.S. Supreme Court the constitutionality of its parental consent rule for minors seeking abortions. If the question ever came up, the Ohio Supreme Court is almost certain to reach a similar conclusion, given that parental consent can be justified as necessary to protect the minor's health. Next up, ultimately, Issue 1, far from creating a regime of abortion without limits, like what's-his-name said, allows for reasonable regulations consistent with what has existed in Ohio for the past 50 years. It provides that the state may prohibit abortion after fetal viability. It says so right in the terms, so long as it allows for exceptions when the life or health of the woman is jeopardized by pregnancy. Viewed in this light, it is not surprising that opponents of the amendment have relied on scare tactics to generate opposition to Issue 1. If choosing between Ohio's current law with its 6-week ban and the Issue 1 amendment, which leaves private health decisions to the individual instead of to the government, freedom, it is clear which option Ohio voters will conclude is too extreme. All right, well, the end. Those are the sanitized versions, I guess I would say, of the lies that Republicans were telling about it. And it doesn't matter to some extent now that they have gone ahead and ratified this amendment. But like I said, there's always room for mischief. And if there isn't, Republicans are willing to claim that they've invented room for it, even if they haven't. So keep a close eye on things is all I can tell you right now. Okay, let's see. Other things to share with you, and there were several that I thought we can switch gears with. Which way to go right now? Well, how about this? Well, first of all, I should remind you that I guess the New York fraud trial continues. I see that there are some live tweeters continuing to cover proceedings up there. The circus continues, the desperate attempts by Trump's attorneys to provoke something that they can claim validates their hopes for a mistrial or appeal. And, well, let's see. Where's the, I had something actually perhaps to add on that, but maybe we've gotten all the way through it at this point. But there's another important point to be made about that stuff. But we'll see if we can get there before the end of the show. Instead, I thought I might take a look at this piece. Jack Schaefer in Politico, who not a huge fan, really. And I guess I'm drawn to this because it kind of sort of makes a point that I think we're leaning toward, but then cages, are just sort of, I guess, cages or couches this in uncertainty in a way that makes me say, come on, Schaefer, are you with us or not? Politico magazine Jack Schaefer writing, Trump's recipe for a shockingly raw power grab. Of course, you know what we're talking about because we've already read the Washington Post's piece on this. And also we've been around for a while and have seen exactly, he's been very explicit about what he wants to do. The former president and his allies are reportedly planning to lay siege to the rule of law. So it's kind of like Jack Schaefer coming around to making an important realization. But he still says, there's still some if and some iffiness about it in his view. You can't say Donald Trump didn't warn us, he says. Trump and his think tank loyalists are collecting the ingredients and refining the recipe for an authoritarian regime should he win the 2024 presidential election. And again, I have to remind you, and I guess Jack Schaefer, Trump and his think tank loyalists are collecting the ingredients and refining the recipe for an authoritarian regime, even if he does not win the 2024 presidential election. Winning the presidential election is not important to this scheme. It's an incidental annoyance that they have to go through it. The presidential election of 2024 is an opportunity to sell his plans to people and to convince the lunatic 35% that might still support him that maybe they need to murder the rest of us if they don't win. It's not, well, if you elect me, I'm going to do this. It's, well, if you elect me, then I'll do this unobstructed. But much of what I plan to do is take out my revenge on people who don't support me and have tried to, limit my ability to take over this country by arresting, exiling, or murdering them. So, we're going to get to those murders that you wanted to commit one way or the other. If I win, you will be deputized to commit those atrocities as deputies under the Insurrection Act. There'll be a cloak of legality to it. We'll pass Nuremberg laws to allow for this and to give you the color of law. If we lose, then I just want you to murder these people out of sheer frustration. And then we'll be the only ones left around and we'll seize power and rule this way as losers. But, losers who killed everybody else. So winners in their view. So that's still being ignored. Anyway, back to Jack Schaefer here. According to a page one story in the Washington Post on Monday, Trump plans on the first day of his new administration to invoke the Insurrection Act so he can dispatch the military to counter any demonstrations that might resist his policies. Why might he need the Insurrection Act? Well, the piece also notes that Trump intends to turbo-politicize the Justice Department and order prosecutions of his former aides and officials who have criticized him. Perhaps he thinks the country won't let him go buck wild on the rule of law without a stink. So he wants to be ready to sick troops on the inevitable protesters. Fingered by Trump for legal beatdowns, the Post reports, are one-time Trump stalwarts and staffers like former Chief of Staff John Kelly, former Attorney General William Barr, his ex-attorney, Ty Cobb, I'm glad he mentioned him, and former Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair Mark Milley. I think I've seen other write-ups where they also leave Ty Cobb out of it. It's funny. Anyway, Trump has singled out other officials at the FBI and the Department of Justice for prosecution, the piece adds, as well as President Joe Biden and his family. Like executing the Tsar and his family. Leading Trump's Insurrection Act initiative is Jeffrey Clark, a Trump-era Department of Justice official. You know who he is. Currently being prosecuted for his part in an alleged scheme to overturn Georgia's 2020 election results. According to the Post piece, Trump intends to leaven the entire federal bureaucracy with appointees like Clark who are willing to do his bidding. Told by a colleague that there would be riots in the streets if Trump sought to stay in office despite losing the 2020 election, Clark is said to have responded, that's why there's an Insurrection Act. How much of this Trump power lust is new? Well, recall that he called for the Constitution's termination in December in 2022 so that he could return to the presidency. Also, he's always loved to entertain himself and his followers by talking about throwing opponents in jail. Over the summer, ABC News compiled a list of plenty of people he wanted indicted or jailed for their crimes, including ex-FBI Director James Comey, former Special Counsel Robert Mueller, Steele dossier author Christopher Steele, Bill and Hillary Clinton, former National Security Advisor John Bolton. as well. You may recall that locking up Hillary Clinton was elemental to his 2016 campaign. As for testing the limits of presidential power, that's old hat too. During his first administration, he banned Muslim visitors, issued an emergency declaration to build a border wall after Congress refused to pay for it, and sought to overturn the 2020 election results. But this new round of bombast and threats is not just a matter of Trump being Trump. What's different this time is that Trump's building an extra legal foundation of declarations and appointments to make his 2017 to 2021 aspirations, which sounded like off-the-cuff ravings at the time, come true. Recall the scary preview of his ambitions he gave us in a March 2023 speech at the Conservative Political Action Conference, in which he promised his, quote, wronged and betrayed supporters that he would be their justice and retribution. However critically you think of the team Trump assembled in his first administration, he could never convince them to conduct prosecutions of either his political opponents or officials who defied him. The next time around, we won't be so lucky if he succeeds in peppering the Department of Justice and other agencies with his yes men. Can he get away with it? It's not illegal for a president to instruct an attorney general on how to do his job, as long as those instructions are consistent with the law. But lining up presidential critics for prosecution, as Trump appears ready to do, makes a mockery of that consistency, especially when no laws appear to have been broken. By putting us on notice that he plans to punish his past foes, and presumably his future foes, with the justice system, Trump has given us a head start in blocking his future lawlessness. These promises, call them campaign promises, deserve full scrutiny from the press. Starting today, political reporters have a duty, I don't know if they'll listen to it, but a duty to grill Trump's primary opponents, especially the Trump-light candidates Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott, and Vivek Ramaswamy, on whether or not they support Trump's plans for political prosecutions and the imposition of military power over the citizenry, essentially the rapid dismantling of our democratic system of governance. No caviling, is that right? Caviling answers to these questions should be accepted. Instead, reporters should push candidates to give the sort of unequivocal answers that will either qualify them for cabinet positions in the Trump regime, like, yes, it's okay for a president to jail his opponents and for the military to occupy cities, or earn them a Trump indictment should he win. No, everything about the reported Trump plan for trials and military control stinks. Reporters should serve the same queries to Trump wherever he goes, on TV and radio call-ins, while eating campaign hot dogs and cotton candy, while sitting down with newspaper editorial boards, if he bothers to do any of that. If the Washington Post has accurately captured the style of government Trump intends to deploy should he win, I believe they have, well, then there's no bigger issue on the plate than Trump's reported plans. If he has totalitarian designs for mass political trials in storage and plans to release them in 2025, the press and his political opponents, including Joe Biden, should escalate their criticism of him pronto to make it the leading political issue. Biden can't pretend to be an advocate of constitutional self-governance unless he presses Trump hard here. So there's a way for Biden to stink on this too. Great. Trump, ever the master of evasion, can't be allowed to fudge who he intends to prosecute, nor should we allow him to make such threats without describing in detail what crimes he thinks have been committed and what evidence exists. Well, what if he just doesn't answer? I don't know. The same question should be directed at Trump supporters and his donors. Trump, after all, has put them on notice too with his plans, and they're as complicit in the plot to throttle our civil liberties as Trump is believed to be. Trump claims his current promises of prosecution are a matter of payback. Prosecutors in Georgia and New York and in the federal government prosecuted him for what he considers political reasons, so he thinks that frees him to return the favor to his foes. But the Trump equation doesn't balance. Remember, it was his style to call for jailing his foes long before any indictment landed on his doorstep. Also, Trump's alleged crimes have been named, delineated with supporting evidence, accepted for trial by an independent judiciary. Any counterclaim by Trump, such as the recent one where he's insisted he's an American Nelson Mandela, is a complete fantasy. Again, we've been warned. Trump doesn't just want to be president. He wants to be prosecutor, judge, jury, and jailer, too. Why doesn't he just come clean and announce his campaign for dictator. Well, because he's not going to. So we sort of depend on you for saying that. And instead you kind of say, I mean, I know this was a pretty strongly worded piece, to be sure, but there's still, if what the Washington Post reports is accurate, he says it's accurate. If he really plans to, he says he's going to do those things. Why not just simply cover it that way? You know what? I mean, if a presidential candidate came out and said, I'm campaigning on, my platform is I'm going to, I don't know, whatever it is, cut taxes by 15%. They will ask questions about whether or not he really truly means to do that. And if he doesn't deliver it, they'll hold him to account. This is a campaign promise that was broken. Here, he's laying out what his campaign promises are, and yet the practice is to say, well, if. Like, maybe he's lying. I mean, that's not a bad assumption with Donald Trump, to be sure. But at some point, you should just, I think, be able to assume, yeah, he actually means it, and we're going to find out whether or not he intends to deliver on it, I guess. But more to the point, we're going to tell people that he does intend to deliver on it, because he's said that we're actually going to take him at his word here, which is remarkable and maybe a mistake. I understand there's an inherent contradiction, but still, I don't know. Enough with the ifs and the hedging in all this. It's as strong a piece as you're likely to get printed in Politico. That's true. And I guess we should be thankful for that. And we'll take it and run with it after that. All right. Let's see. Things wrap up here. Well, right about now. You can hear the music telling us that that's going to happen. Oh, I want to at least put you on notice here. I didn't get to read this here, but Raw Story was covering this. Marjorie Taylor Greene, or Murdery Trader Greene as we know her to be, already out there suggesting that Mike Johnson should be ousted. So I guess they never got rid of that one person can bring the motion to vacate the chair thing. I don't know when they would have had the opportunity to do that. So fine, good, great, go for it, I guess. I don't think she'll really find the courage to do that. But we'll return tomorrow and cover much more that's still on the agenda and still stuck in pocket. There's a whole week's worth to go, but only 2 days to do it.
In the morning with David Walt.
All right, time now to let Justice Putnam take the microphone and tell you what's important and what's on his mind. Beginning right here, the new filing by the Jack Smith team fights back against Trump's efforts to delay his trial past the election. The law and order guy who wants swift justice for everyone else wants another delay. What's that about? Stay tuned.